The hospital room was silent except for the steady beep of monitors. Sarah Martinez held the tiny hand one last time, her tears falling onto the soft pink blanket. "I love you more than you'll ever know," she whispered to the sleeping infant. "And that's why I have to let you go." The social worker stepped forward with gentle eyes, ready to take the baby who would never know her birth mother's name. But what could drive a mother to make such an impossible choice? What circumstances could tear apart the most sacred bond in nature? The answer lies in a story that began 18 months earlier, when Sarah thought her biggest problem was paying rent. Fast forward to that same hospital room, but 12 hours later. Sarah sat alone now, staring at the empty bassinet beside her bed. The adoption papers were signed. Her daughter was gone. But on her nightstand lay an envelope marked, "To be opened when you're ready," left by the adoptive parents. Inside was a photograph and an address that would change everything Sarah thought she knew about sacrifice, love, and the true meaning of family. Because sometimes giving up everything is the only way to save what matters most. This is Sarah's story, a tale of an impossible choice that began with a secret her own mother took to the grave, and ended with a reunion that no one saw coming. It's a story about the lengths we go to protect those we love, even when that protection looks like abandonment to the outside world. Before we dive into Sarah's journey, take a moment to hit that like button if you're ready for an emotional story, subscribe if you love real-life tales of hope, and drop a comment letting us know where in the world you're watching from. Your support means everything to these storytellers. 18 months before that heart-wrenching hospital scene, Sarah Martinez was living what most would consider an ordinary life in Phoenix, Arizona. At 24, she worked 2 jobs, morning shifts at a local diner and evenings at a retail store, just to afford her small studio apartment. Her mother, Rosa, had raised her alone after Sarah's father disappeared when she was 3. Rosa had always been Sarah's anchor, the one person who believed in her dreams of becoming a nurse, even when Sarah herself had doubts. Rosa had been fighting breast cancer for 2 years, and the medical bills were mounting. Sarah spent her days off driving her mother to chemotherapy appointments, holding her hand through the nausea, and pretending to be strong when she felt like falling apart. Their evening routine was sacred. Rosa would sit in her worn recliner while Sarah made dinner, and they'd watch old movies together, Rosa sharing stories about her childhood in Mexico that Sarah had heard 100 times but never tired of hearing. "Mija," Rosa would say, stroking Sarah's hair, "promise me something. Promise me you'll never give up on love, even when it seems impossible." Sarah always agreed, not understanding why her mother seemed so desperate for this promise, why her eyes held such sadness when she spoke about love and family. The signs were subtle at first. Rosa became more secretive about her medical appointments, insisting on taking the bus alone. She started asking strange questions about forgiveness, about whether Sarah thought people could love someone they'd never met. Late at night, Sarah would catch her mother going through old photo albums, tears streaming down her face. When Sarah asked what was wrong, Rosa would just say she was thinking about the past, about choices she'd made long ago. The first crack in Sarah's world came on a Tuesday morning in October. She arrived at the cancer center to pick up Rosa after what was supposed to be a routine checkup, but found her mother sitting in the parking lot sobbing. The doctor had delivered devastating news. The cancer had spread to Rosa's liver and bones. She had maybe 6 months to live, probably less. "I'm not ready," Rosa whispered as Sarah held her. "There are things I need to tell you, Mija, things I should have said years ago." But when Sarah pressed for details, Rosa just shook her head. "Not yet. I need to find the right words." That evening, their routine shattered completely. Instead of their usual dinner and movie, Rosa sat Sarah down at their small kitchen table and pulled out a manila envelope that looked like it had been opened and closed countless times over the years. Her hands shook as she placed it between them. "Sarah, I need you to know that everything I did because I loved you more than my own life." Rosa's voice was barely a whisper. "But I also need you to know that loving someone sometimes means making choices that look wrong to everyone else." Inside the envelope was a birth certificate, but not Sarah's. It belonged to someone named Elena Martinez, born the same year as Sarah, in the same hospital. The mother's name was Rosa Martinez. The father's name was listed as unknown. Sarah stared at the document, her mind struggling to process what she was seeing. "Mama, I don't understand." "Who is Elena?" Rosa's tears fell freely now. "She's your sister, Mija, your twin sister. And I gave her away the day you were both born." The room spun. Sarah felt like she was drowning in questions. How could her mother have hidden something so enormous? Where was Elena now? Why had Rosa kept one daughter and given away the other? Rosa's confession came in broken pieces over the next several days. She had been 17 and unmarried when she discovered she was carrying twins. Her own mother had disowned her, and the father, a married man who had promised to leave his wife but never did, disappeared when he learned about the pregnancy. Rosa had nowhere to go, no money, no support system. "I could barely take care of myself, let alone 2 babies," Rosa explained, her voice heavy with 24 years of guilt. "But I couldn't give both of you away. I couldn't lose both my daughters. So I made a choice that has haunted me every day since." She had arranged a private adoption for one of the twins through a Catholic charity. The adoptive parents were wealthy, educated, and desperately wanted a child. They promised to give Elena everything Rosa never could: stability, opportunities, a future without the struggle that had defined Rosa's own life. "I held you both for 1 hour after you were born," Rosa continued. "I memorized every tiny detail of your faces. And then I had to choose which one of you to keep and which one to let go. I chose you because you were born first, by just 3 minutes. But Mija, there isn't a day that goes by that I don't wonder if I chose wrong, if I robbed Elena of her real mother, and you of your sister." Sarah's world collapsed. Everything she thought she knew about her identity, her family, her mother's love, all of it had been built on this tremendous lie. She felt angry and betrayed, but also heartbroken for her mother, who had carried this secret like a stone in her chest for over 2 decades. The routine that had anchored their lives disintegrated. Sarah couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't focus at work. She found herself staring at her reflection in mirrors, wondering if Elena looked exactly like her, wondering if somewhere in the world was another version of herself, living a completely different life. 3 weeks after Rosa's confession, Sarah met Marcus Williams at the diner where she worked. He was different from anyone she'd ever known, gentle, patient, and somehow able to see through the walls she'd built around her pain. Marcus was in Phoenix temporarily, working as a photographer for a documentary about immigrant families. He had kind eyes and an easy smile, and he seemed genuinely interested in Sarah's stories, even the painful ones. When Sarah finally told Marcus about Elena, expecting him to run from the complicated mess of her life, he surprised her by pulling out his phone and showing her a website for a private investigator who specialized in adoption reunions. "Maybe it's time to find her," Marcus suggested quietly. "Maybe that's what your mother needs, to see Elena again before—" He didn't finish the sentence, but Sarah understood. But Marcus carried his own secret, one that would complicate everything in ways Sarah couldn't imagine. During their conversations about family and adoption, Marcus never mentioned that his own sister had been adopted. He never mentioned that she had been born in Phoenix, to a teenage mother 24 years ago. He never mentioned her name was Elena. The tension between Sarah and Marcus grew deeper with each passing day. He would ask careful questions about Elena's adoption, about the hospital where Sarah was born, about the charity that had handled the placement. Sarah, lost in her own grief and confusion, didn't notice the strange intensity in his questions or the way his hands shook when she mentioned specific details. Marcus began staying late at the diner long after Sarah's shift ended, claiming he was working on his documentary. But really, he was making phone calls, cross-referencing information, trying to confirm what he had begun to suspect. The birth dates matched. The hospital matched. The charity matched. And when Sarah showed him a baby photo of herself, the resemblance to his adopted sister was unmistakable. Every few days brought a new revelation that deepened the complexity of Sarah's situation. First came the discovery of Rosa's hidden medical records, which revealed that her cancer was progressing faster than she'd admitted. She had maybe 2 months left, not 6. Then Sarah found a shoebox in Rosa's closet filled with birthday cards, 23 of them, one for each year since Elena's birth. Rosa had written a card every year on the twins' birthday, pouring her heart out to the daughter she'd never known, but never sent a single one. The cards were heartbreaking in their detail, Rosa describing Sarah's milestones and wondering if Elena was reaching the same ones, sharing family recipes she hoped Elena might someday taste, apologizing over and over for her choice. A week later, Marcus presented Sarah with a photograph he claimed to have found in his research. It showed a young woman who looked exactly like Sarah. Same dark eyes, same smile, same dimple in her left cheek. The woman was wearing a nursing school graduation cap and gown. Elena had become the nurse that Sarah dreamed of being, but could never afford to become. "I found her," Marcus said simply, handing Sarah an address in Scottsdale, just 30 minutes away. "She's been living here all along." But when Sarah called the number Marcus had found, the conversation was awkward and painful. Elena was polite, but distant. She knew she was adopted, but she'd never felt the need to find her birth family. She had loving parents, a successful career, and a life she was happy with. She wasn't looking for complications. "I appreciate you reaching out," Elena said carefully, "but I'm not sure what you want from me. My parents are my real family. I don't need another one." The call ended with Elena agreeing to meet once, mainly out of curiosity, but making it clear she wasn't interested in a relationship. Meanwhile, Rosa's condition deteriorated rapidly. She was hospitalized twice in 10 days, and the doctors made it clear that she needed to prepare for the end. The reunion with Elena took on desperate urgency. It might be Rosa's only chance to see her other daughter and find some peace before she died. The meeting between Rosa, Sarah, and Elena took place on a Sunday afternoon in November at a neutral location, a quiet park where Rosa used to take Sarah as a child. Elena arrived exactly on time, professional and reserved in her approach. The resemblance between the twins was startling. They could have been mirrors of each other, but the reunion was nothing like the emotional embrace Rosa had imagined. Elena was kind but guarded, asking practical questions about Rosa's health and their family history while maintaining careful distance. She listened politely as Rosa apologized through tears, but her responses were measured and clinical. "I understand why you made the choice you did," Elena said, "and I'm grateful, actually. I had a wonderful childhood with parents who could provide for me. I'm not angry, but I'm also not looking for a relationship that would complicate my life now." The betrayal came when Elena revealed information she shouldn't have known. She mentioned details about Sarah's work schedule, about the diner where she worked, about Rosa's specific type of cancer, details that Sarah had never shared and that wouldn't have been available through any normal research. "How do you know all of this?" Sarah demanded. Elena's composure cracked slightly. Someone contacted me before you did. Someone who thought we should meet." The truth emerged slowly, painfully. Marcus had found Elena weeks before he'd told Sarah. He had been feeding Elena information about their family, preparing her for the meeting, coaching her on how to handle the situation. But why? What was his connection to all of this? Elena's final revelation shattered everything. "The man who contacted me, Marcus, he's my brother. Well, my adoptive brother. He was adopted by my parents when I was 12. She paused, seeing the shock on Sarah's face. "He didn't tell you, did he? He's known all along that you were my sister. This whole thing, meeting you, getting close to you, it was planned." Sarah's world imploded for the second time in 2 months. Marcus had manipulated her, used her grief and vulnerability to orchestrate some kind of reunion that she never asked for. Every conversation, every gentle touch, every moment of intimacy had been built on deception. She felt sick, betrayed, and utterly alone. When she confronted Marcus that evening, he tried to explain. "I saw how much pain Elena carried, knowing she was adopted but being too scared to search for her birth family. When I met you, when I realized who you were, I thought I could help everyone find peace. By lying to me, Sarah screamed. By pretending to care about me when really you were just manipulating me for your sister? Marcus insisted his feelings for Sarah were real, that he had fallen in love with her despite the complicated circumstances. But Sarah couldn't hear anything past the betrayal. She told him to leave and never contact her again. Rosa's condition worsened dramatically after the failed reunion. The stress and disappointment seemed to accelerate her decline. She stopped eating, stopped responding to treatments, and spent most of her time sleeping. Sarah sat by her bedside, watching her mother slip away, feeling like she had failed at everything. At protecting Rosa from heartbreak, at building a relationship with Elena, at recognizing Marcus's deception. "I'm sorry, Mija," Rosa whispered during one of her few lucid moments. "I wanted to fix things before I left you. I wanted you to have your sister." Sarah held her mother's hand and forgave her for everything, but inside she felt hollow. She was about to lose the only family she'd ever known, and the sister she'd found wanted nothing to do with her. She had never felt more alone in the world. Rosa passed away on a Thursday morning in December, with Sarah holding her hand and whispering promises to live the life her mother had always wanted for her. The funeral was small, just Sarah, a few co-workers, and some neighbors. Elena sent flowers but didn't attend. Marcus tried to come, but Sarah asked him to leave. But grief has a way of clarifying what really matters. As Sarah went through Rosa's belongings, she found more evidence of her mother's love. Not just for her, but for Elena too. There were newspaper clippings from Elena's college graduation, professional achievements, even a photo Rosa had somehow obtained of Elena's engagement party the year before. Rosa had never stopped loving the daughter she'd given away, and she had never stopped hoping for a chance to be part of her life. In a letter addressed to Sarah, Rosa wrote, "If something happens to you, Mija, Elena needs to know she has family. She needs to know that someone in this world shares her blood and her story. Don't let my mistakes rob you both of that connection." The letter gave Sarah the courage to try again with Elena, but this time honestly, without Marcus's manipulation in the background. She wrote a long letter explaining everything: Rosa's death, the guilt their mother had carried, the love she had held for Elena despite the separation, and Sarah's own desire to know her sister, not out of need but out of genuine care. Elena's response came 2 weeks later. She agreed to meet again, this time without agenda or expectations, just to see if they could find some genuine connection. The second meeting was different, more honest, more vulnerable. Elena shared her own struggles with identity, her complicated feelings about adoption, her curiosity about Rosa and the life she might have had. They began meeting regularly for coffee, sharing stories and slowly building trust. Elena was reserved by nature, but she was also kind and thoughtful. She began asking about Rosa's recipes, about family traditions, about the stories Rosa used to tell. She was hungry for connection too, even if she hadn't realized it. The climax came 3 months after Rosa's death, when Elena showed up at Sarah's apartment late one evening, tears streaming down her face. She was holding an envelope that she said had been waiting for her at her parents' house. "My mom, my adoptive mom, she gave this to me tonight," Elena said, her voice shaking. "She's been holding it since I was 18, waiting for the right time to give it to me." The envelope contained a letter from Rosa, written shortly after Elena's adoption was finalized. In it, Rosa explained her choice with the wisdom of a young mother who knew she was making the hardest decision of her life. She wrote about holding Elena, about the songs she used to sing to both twins during pregnancy, about the hopes and dreams she had for the daughter she was giving away. But the final paragraph was what broke both sisters completely. "If you're reading this, it means you're old enough to understand that love sometimes looks like sacrifice. I didn't give you away because I didn't want you. I gave you away because I wanted everything for you. Everything I couldn't provide. I hope someday you'll meet your sister Sarah, and you'll see in her face the love I have for you both. You are not forgotten. You are not abandoned. You are loved beyond measure." Elena collapsed into Sarah's arms, finally allowing herself to grieve for the mother she'd never known, and the family she'd been afraid to claim. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. I'm so sorry I was cold to you. I was just scared. The revelation that changed everything was Elena's confession about why she had really been hesitant to connect with Sarah. Elena was pregnant, 6 months along with her first child, and she was terrified of the implications of suddenly having a complicated family history. She was scared that learning about Rosa's struggles would somehow doom her own ability to be a good mother. I was afraid that if I got too close to you, I'd inherit all the pain and struggle that seemed to follow our family, Elena admitted. But now I realize I was throwing away the most beautiful gift, the chance to know my sister, to let my baby know their aunt, to carry on Mama Rosa's love instead of running from it. The hospital room scene from the beginning of our story wasn't about Sarah giving away her child. It was about Sarah being there when Elena gave birth to her daughter. Elena had asked Sarah to be her birth coach, to be the first person to hold her niece, to be the family that Rosa had always wanted them to be. As Sarah held her newborn niece, she whispered the same words Rosa had once whispered to her. "You are loved beyond measure." But this time it wasn't a goodbye. It was a hello to a new generation that would grow up knowing their full story, understanding that family isn't just about blood, but about the love we choose to share. Elena named her daughter Rosa Martinez Williams, honoring the grandmother she'd never met, but whose love had finally brought the family together. Marcus wasn't part of their story anymore, but his manipulation had inadvertently led to something beautiful. 2 sisters finding each other and choosing to build the family their mother had always dreamed of. Sarah returned to school to become a nurse, with Elena's encouragement and support. Elena shared Rosa's recipes and stories with her daughter, keeping their mother's memory alive. They celebrated birthdays together, holidays together, and the quiet moments in between that make up a real family. The sacrifice Rosa had made all those years ago had finally come full circle. Both her daughters were living the life she had wanted for them, together. The envelope from the opening scene contained one final surprise, a photo of Rosa as a young mother holding 2 babies, taken just moments before she had to say goodbye to Elena. On the back, in Rosa's handwriting, were the words, "My daughters born from one heart, separated by love, reunited by grace. The circle is complete." Elena had carried this photo with her through the delivery, a reminder that some loves are strong enough to survive any separation, and some families are meant to find their way back to each other, no matter how long it takes. Thank you for joining us on Sarah and Elena's incredible journey of family, sacrifice, and rediscovered love. Their story reminds us that sometimes the greatest acts of love require the greatest acts of faith. If this story touched your heart, you might also love our video about a father who searched for 20 years to reunite with the son he thought he'd lost forever. Click here to watch that amazing story, and remember, family isn't always about who raised you, but about who chooses to love you unconditionally.